WNBA Finals Game 2 out in Brooklyn in just over 90 seconds to go. Lynx down 6 and Courtney Williams turns it over. Leonie Febich picks up the loose ball, decides to pull up for the triple, drains it. That puts the Liberty up 9, and they go on to win 80-66 and evening this series at a game apiece. Now Game 3 set for Wednesday. This one taking its way back to Minnesota. And we're now joined by CBS Sports WNBA writer Erica Ayala on the heels of Game 2 of the WNBA Finals. Liberty able to now even this series with their win. But before we even dive into that nitty-gritty of Game 2, I want to talk about just after that collapse that we saw in the first game of this series for the Liberty, just how impressed were you with the way they were able to respond on Sunday?
This is a huge win for the New York Liberty. I think even last series, in this short series, 2 games against Minnesota, we've seen the resilience of the New York Liberty. That was perhaps the missing ingredient among some key players like a Leonie Febich. Only had 3 points, but she hit a dagger 3-pointer exactly when the New York Liberty needed it. But going back to resilience, you have to talk about Benijah Laney Hamilton. Has been nursing a leg injury, had a minor surgery in the middle of the season, and comes back and has this type of performance. I spoke to her yesterday at practice and asked her, how are you coping with these injuries, knowing that you don't always have what is considered your 100%? She said she's focused on the goal, on the mission, and she's taking what the game is giving her. And that led to a monster performance offensively for Benijah Laney Hamilton, exactly what the New York Liberty needed today.
Taking what the game gave her, well, she also gave a game-high 20 points in her outing. But meanwhile, as for the Lynx, despite closing the Liberty's once 17-point lead to within 2, they gave up 26 points to turnovers and then was held to just 2 points in the final few minutes of this game. But what, in your eyes, was their ultimate demise?
For me, I think you need more players than just Napheesa Collier and Courtney Williams getting active offensively. When you look at this Minnesota team, Kayla McBride is such a huge part to what they try to do, and she has not been what they need offensively. I think another player that you have to look at is Bridget Carlton, someone who we know can get hot for this Lynx squad, but both Carlton and McBride only 8 points in this game, and Carlton only had 5 in Game 1. So I think that this is a Minnesota team that certainly hangs their head on defense. That being said, they still have to be present, and they definitely have some weapons that they can utilize on the offensive side. But to your point about the turnovers and the transition basketball that the Liberty played in Game 2 especially, that has hurt Minnesota in this series.
All right, well, let's go ahead and maybe start looking ahead a little bit. Now this series tied. We're now heading to Minnesota for the first time. Just what's your outlook of this series going forward?
What we've seen in both games is the New York Liberty taking command of the game early on, and then Minnesota having to storm back. If I'm Cheryl Reeve and the Minnesota Lynx coaching staff, especially knowing that they're going home to Target Center, you want to flip that. You want to turn the tide, and you not only want to, but at this point, you have to command the game from the outset, especially with home court advantage. You stole one from New York on the road. You don't want them to do the same to you. And for me, for Minnesota, that is a good start. They have to start early because on the flip side, we've seen the New York Liberty early starts, but they have these little gaps that are prevalent with this team, and usually they're finding those gaps in their offense and in kind of the flow of the game late in the game. So if you're the Minnesota Lynx, you want to take advantage of that. If you're the New York Liberty, you have to play calm and steady throughout the whole game, continue with the starts, the good starts offensively, and then really hunker down on the defensive side in the middle frames of the game.
Yeah, Lynx can't afford to go to another slow start, trailing from behind and looking to play a game of catch-up, especially hopefully that home court advantage playing in their favor in Game 3. As always, Erica, we appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for the insight. And how about we go back to that big outing that we saw from Breanna Stewart? We'll check out her 15-plus points, 5-plus rebounds, 5 or more assists, and 5 or more steals in a WNBA Finals game, the first player to do so since Alyssa Thomas did it back in 2019. Also got to make note that her 7 steals, the most in Finals history. Well, the Liberty answer back after blowing an 18-point lead in Game 1. New York responds with an 80-66 victory in Game 2 on Sunday. Brianna Stewart had a game-high 21 points to go along with the WNBA Finals record 7 steals. Post-gamer Terrika Foster-Brasby caught up with Jonquel Jones.
Jonquel, huge Game 2 win today. At one point now, 17 lead kind of got down to 2, but you guys found the strength to really muscle back in. What did that take to kind of get yourselves together and get back in that moment?
Learning from Game 1, honestly, learning from Game 1 and understanding that Minnesota is a great team and they're going to make runs, but we have to weather the storm and just stay together and play the type of basketball that got us the lead in the first place.
Yeah. Now, I know that I'm not going to ask you questions about officiating, but however, the officiating did seem different from the beginning of the game to maybe the second half. Mm-hmm. Did you guys have to make adjustments in your game or just in your overall thinking, knowing that there may have been some changes from the first half to the second?
Yeah, most definitely. We understood that that's outside of our control. As much as or as frustrating as it is in certain situations, that we have to go out there and play our style of basketball, not worry about the referees, because it becomes a distraction when you worry about every single call, or you're worried about what the refs aren't or are calling. And so we talked about it at halftime, just kind of leaving the refs alone. Of course, people have emotional moments where they'll say something, but altogether, I was really happy with how we handled it, and we walk away with the win. So I guess we did a really good job.
Talk a little bit about Benijah. Coach Sandy Brondello said that she wasn't really feeling her best, but she came in today, dropped 20 on them. B did what B did in things, right? So just kind of talk about what it means to have her as a teammate.
Oh, it means a lot. It means a lot. B is so resilient, man, and just seeing her putting in the work every day, and she's in the training room getting what she needs, and she goes out there and she gives us 110%, even though there's times where she isn't feeling her best, and so for her to be able to have a game like that, it's that validation. Obviously, everybody knows that B is a dog, but to do it in the finals and on a big stage, and then we walk away with the win, I know it feels good for her, and it feels really good for our team.
Last one, heading into Game 3, going into hostile territory in Minnesota. What's the mindset? What do you feel like you need to just make sure you carry over from today into Wednesday?
I think moving the basketball, making sure that Minnesota, like we all know, they're a team that really congest the paint a lot, and they really help a lot on drives. And so just trusting each other, moving the ball, allowing the ball to find the right energy, and that any teammate that's in those situations, we know that they're going to make their shots or make the right plays.
Good win today.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Likewise.
And with that, we're now joined by CBS Sports WNBA analyst Terrika Foster-Brasby. On hand at Barclays Center, we just saw you talk to Jonquel Jones, and she talked about learning from Game 1. The Liberty obviously refusing a deja vu from what we saw in Game 1 and able to hammer this one late in the eventual victory. But with that being said, and you being there on hand, just give me a little bit of the temperament surrounding this Liberty team coming into this one.
Yeah, well, it was very interesting coming into this matchup. It felt like the energy was just a bit different. Coming into Game 1, there was an excitement of dominance, that you could feel from this crowd, from this building, and even a little bit from the team. Coming into Game 2, there was a little bit of nervous energy from the crowd, and I think the mindset for the team was more, we need to get it done. We have to get it done. And they simply took that mindset into the court. Now, I know Minnesota wanted to start off a little differently than they did in Game 1, but they didn't. And instead, the New York Liberty capitalized on it. So the energy, the atmosphere, it was only until literally it was under a minute in the in the fourth quarter. Did you finally feel a sense of relief from this crowd that they could finally celebrate and enjoy what looked to be a Liberty win?
Absolutely, because you can't get too high, especially considering what we saw in Game 1. But also, looking at this game and considering Benijah Laney Hamilton with a 20-point day, Brianna Stewart, a finals record 7 steals, and although Sabrina Ionescu was held almost scoreless in the second half, still stepped up huge defensively. But in your mind, what was the ultimate game changer this time around for the Liberty?
Well, number one, you have to get over the mental hurdle of what happened, right? When once they were able to do that, it absolutely was first and foremost Benijah Laney Hamilton. Coming into this matchup, Sandy Brondello said that she had not been feeling her best, and you could see that on the court in Game 1. Game 2, Benijah, it was her day. She literally was everywhere all over the court, defensively and offensively. She wasn't afraid to get points in the paint, but she also wasn't afraid to step up and shoot that thing. And that was so important to have another player outside of the big three that could contribute offensively for this team. And it also made it a little bit differently for Minnesota on the defensive schemes that they were running, because they had to account for how efficient she had been in this matchup. So that was certainly the first thing that stood out. But secondly, the defensive energy also stood up. Sabrina Ionescu was outstanding defensively, and I don't know how many times people could actually say that about Sabrina, but this season you could see that she has stepped up her game defensively, and this was one of those matchups where she certainly knew that she had to be impactful more than just scoring. She had to be impactful on all ends. Before the end of the first quarter, she had 10 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists. So you could see that she knew how important her energy and her output was going to be for this team today.
Terrika, on the flip side of everything, there was we got to be honest, nearly a repeat of what we saw in game one. The Liberty with that comfy lead in the first half that starts to get a little bit more uncomfortable in that second. But does their history of, especially in these finals, of maybe struggling to hold on to those big leads give you any major concerns as we are now shifting this series to Minnesota?
Yeah, well, the one thing that we keep hearing from this Minnesota team in both game one and game two is they have to come out differently in terms of how they start games. Defensively, though, you could see that this was a game that Minnesota took a little bit differently. They started to bring that defensive energy quite earlier in this matchup. And in that third quarter, we all got a scare because that 17-point lead diminished. It was a 2-point game, 64-66. And at some point, you had to think this could happen again. There's no way this is going to happen again. And it was because Minnesota stepped up their defensive presence. They were the number 2 defensive team in the league the entire season. And for moments in this game, you could see that. I think heading into Minnesota, they rechanneled that. They understand the importance of, one, continuing to have feet on the court. Nafisa Collier got into some foul trouble. She had to sit a little bit today. She had 4 fouls before the end of the third quarter, and that put them in a very precarious situation. So I think they understand the importance of having her on the court, and also the importance of having more contributions from some of their stars. Courtney Williams is someone who was so heavily dependent in game one. They're going to need her in game 3. Kayla McBride, they're also going to need her in game 3. So I think they all know that maybe just being home, feeding off the energy of their home crowd, being back in a comfortable building is something that will help fuel them to what could possibly be a game 3 win.
Game 3 set for Wednesday. Who takes the 2-1 lead in this series? Can the Lynx start off fast this time, or can the Liberty continue to dominate all 4 quarters? We will see soon, and I'm sure we will have more from you, Terrika. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks, Kiana.